Sarah watched her child being taken away by her ex-husband in front of everyone, but no one expected that, hours later, a millionaire farmer would seek her out with a proposal that made her tremble. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The alarm clock went off too late that morning, and Sarah opened her eyes in a panic, her chest tightening even before she glanced at the clock. The sun filtered through the dingy curtains of her small apartment, revealing that her shift at the restaurant had already started. Jolted awake, she sprang from her narrow bed, grabbed the first clean clothes she could find, and dressed hurriedly. There was no time to dwell on it. She'd have to run and come up with a plausible excuse for her boss. Her heart raced at the thought of the reprimand awaiting her, but even more pressing was the headache that had grown the night before as she agonized over how to pay her lawyer for the upcoming custody hearing for Noah. Her son was her life, and the possibility of losing him forever tormented her more than any tardiness at work. She took a quick sip of cold coffee, not even bothering to warm it on the stove. Bills were strewn across the wooden table, a cruel reminder that the money she had was never enough. Outside, the street buzzed with the usual morning traffic heading downtown, and neighbors rushed to their own jobs. Sarah walked briskly to the bus stop, the morning wind whipping her face. She clutched her bag tightly against her chest as if trying to protect the little hope she had left. When she finally got off the bus, she ran toward the restaurant's entrance. Out of breath, she slipped through the employee door, feeling the curious gazes of her co-workers. The manager, a burly man with tired features, stood with arms crossed, his expression one of displeasure. Still, he let her start her shift, knowing they were swamped with customers and couldn't afford to lose one of their hardest-working servers. Despite his irritation, he could see the desperation in Sarah's eyes, desperation that went far beyond mere irresponsibility. She quickly tied on her apron and stepped into the dining area. The place was bustling, as it often was on Friday mornings. Many of the patrons were regulars, retirees seeking fresh coffee and warm bread, salespeople fueling up for the day, and even a group of students who showed up from time to time. Sarah tried to ignore her exhaustion, forcing a professional smile as she approached her first table. She handed out menus and took orders efficiently, though inside her mind was a whirlwind of worries. In the midst of the chaos, a gruff voice called her aside, its tone impatient. She approached a surly customer complaining about late juice and cold toast. Sarah took a deep breath, apologized, and quickly retook his order to fix the mistake. Her hands trembled. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not now. Every penny was crucial to pay the lawyer's fees. While waiting at the counter for the next table's coffee, Jana, a co-worker with a kind smile and lively eyes, approached her. Jana was one of the few people at work who knew about Sarah's struggles. Speaking softly, she asked if Sarah was okay, noting her frantic arrival and dark circles under her eyes. Sarah shrugged it off, downplaying the situation. But Jana, perceptive as ever, touched her arm gently and urged her to take care of herself. "Are you eating properly?" she asked with concern. Sarah let out a humorless laugh. "I'm not even sleeping properly, let alone eating well, but I'll survive." Jana sighed and returned to serving tables, promising to help however she could. Before Sarah could get back to the dining area, a court officer entered the restaurant, asking for someone named Sarah Turner. An awkward silence filled the room. There was no way to pretend it wasn't her. Blushing, Sarah stepped forward as the officer handed her an envelope. Many patrons glanced curiously in her direction. She had no choice but to sign the receipt and take the papers, knowing they had to be related to Noah's custody case. A wave of numbness swept over her. Was it a summons for another hearing or some unexpected filing? She didn't have time to read the documents right then, so she tried to slip them into her bag, but her fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled with the envelope. Seeking a quiet corner to review the papers, she headed to the small staff area behind the counter and pulled out her phone. She needed to call her lawyer, but she didn't have enough credit. She considered making a collect call, but even if she managed that, there was still the issue of overdue fees. Her lawyer had already warned her that he couldn't continue representing her without at least partial payment. The thought of losing her lawyer made her panic. Without him, Michael would have a much better chance of winning the next hearing. Taking a deep breath, Sarah returned to the dining area, trying to steady her thoughts. She had to keep her job. She had to keep her head up. That's when she noticed a man with a calm demeanor sitting at the counter near the register. He wore simple clothes, and a felt hat rested beside his plate as if it were part of his daily attire. Sarah had seen him there before, but this morning he seemed particularly attuned to the commotion around him. His clear eyes followed her movements with a quiet, genuine concern that she wasn't used to. However, before she could react, a familiar and unwelcome voice rang out from the restaurant's front door. Michael walked in, holding Noah's hand. Sarah's ex-husband exuded his usual arrogance. Head high, posture radiating superiority. Several customers cast disapproving glances, recognizing him as the local businessman who loved to appear in newspaper columns touting his supposed good deeds. Noah clung to his father's hand but kept his head down, as if trying to disappear. When the boy spotted his mother, he brightened for a moment, but Michael's grip tightened. "I came to pick up Noah for a day out," Michael announced, his smile more of a smirk. "Maybe someday you'll manage to pay your debts and prove you can take care of him, huh, Sarah?" Sarah felt her blood boil. It wasn't his scheduled visitation day. The judge had been clear about the arrangements, and this weekend, Noah was supposed to stay with her. The restaurant fell silent. All eyes turned to the confrontation. Jana exchanged a worried glance with Sarah, ready to step in, while the manager frowned, unsure whether to stay out of the personal dispute or demand that Michael leave. "Michael, let me work," Sarah pleaded, keeping her voice low to avoid involving the entire restaurant. "The hearing is next week. Until then, you can't just show up and take Noah." "Yes, I can. I have custody, remember?" Michael snapped, growing impatient. "Or did you forget what the judge decided at the last hearing?" Noah clung tightly to his mother, who instinctively wrapped her arms around him. He trembled, sensing that this wouldn't end well. Michael tried to pull him back, but Sarah stood firm, her legs like pillars anchoring her to the floor. Before the situation could escalate, Jana stepped in, her eyes pleading with Michael to take the conversation outside. Then the manager's voice boomed, "Not in here. I have customers. Take it outside." Michael, realizing he wouldn't get much support, let out an exaggerated sigh but made sure to hurl more cruel remarks at Sarah, questioning her financial and even mental fitness to care for their son. Sarah's throat burned with suppressed emotion. It took all her willpower to hold herself together. That's when she noticed movement beside her. The man with the felt hat stood up, his gaze steady on Michael, as if silently deciding whether to intervene. He said nothing, but his posture made it clear. He was ready to step in if necessary. The tension reached a boiling point. Michael, frustrated, finally released Noah's arm and stepped back, pointing a finger at Sarah as if issuing a dire warning. "This isn't over. At the next hearing, I'll make sure you never get near Noah again." With that, he turned and stormed out of the restaurant, leaving a wave of murmurs in his wake. Sarah, breathing heavily, still held Noah close. She looked at Jana, who nodded reassuringly and guided the boy to a quiet corner, offering him a juice to calm his nerves. Her ex-husband was gone, but his threat lingered in the air. For a moment Sarah felt her head spin, the urge to cry pressing hard against her composure. She needed to pull herself together. It was still her shift. But when she looked at Noah, she felt the undeniable need to hold him tightly. She had to ensure he stayed safe. She had to fight with everything she had. Her lawyer's fees and the tight timeline loomed large in her mind. At least for now, she had managed to keep Noah with her. Customers gradually resumed their conversations, still whispering about the scene they had witnessed. The man with the felt hat remained standing by the counter. In a small gesture of acknowledgement, he tipped his head slightly towards Sarah, saying nothing. She met his gaze and for a fleeting moment saw a kind of understanding she hadn't encountered in a long time. It wasn't pity, but something closer to quiet encouragement, as if he were silently telling her, "You're not alone." Sarah took a deep breath and turned her attention back to Noah, keeping him close. He was scared, but relieved to still be with her. She knelt and hugged him tightly, whispering that everything would be okay, even though she wasn't sure herself. The bustling restaurant, the smell of coffee, and the clatter of dishes faded into the background. Her only focus was protecting her son. She handed Noah over to Jana, ensuring he stayed away from prying eyes while she finished her shift. Her mind raced. She couldn't let Michael get away with this, but she lacked the resources for such an exhausting legal battle. And that man, the one who seemed to understand her without words, who was he? There was no time to dwell on it now. There were customers and a grumpy manager waiting for her to carry on. As Noah sat safely in the corner with Jana, Sarah glanced toward the restaurant door. Michael was climbing into his car, speeding away. For a brief moment, despair clawed at her chest. What if her ex-husband really used all his financial power to crush her in court? At the same time, the steady presence of the stranger who had watched her with quiet kindness sparked a small warmth in her heart, a reminder that perhaps, just perhaps, she wasn't entirely alone in this fight. Sarah was lying on the couch, too drained to move, when she heard the sound of Noah's little footsteps in the hallway. The previous night, after enduring Michael's furious glare and the public humiliation at the restaurant, she'd barely managed to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, a wave of fear coursed through her, reminding her that time was running out to prove her capability as a mother. Although Noah's presence that morning brought her some comfort, she knew she couldn't keep living on the edge like this. When her phone rang, bringing Jana's gentle voice, Sarah forced herself to get up. Jana called to say she'd be arriving a bit late but would stop by the apartment before heading to the restaurant. Sarah thanked her, relieved to have a friend willing to help look after Noah while she worked. She then walked to the kitchen and gave Noah a little kiss as he quietly ate his cereal, still feeling the tension in the air since the incident with his father. A short while later, Jana knocked on the door with her usual warm smile. As soon as she entered, she hugged Sarah and played with Noah, coaxing a few shy giggles out of him. Jana quickly noticed the deep circles under Sarah's eyes and invited her to open up if she needed to vent. Sarah simply said, "I just need to work and save as much money as I can. The next hearing could be decisive." Jana nodded without pressing further. Deep down, they both knew the situation was spiraling out of control. Sarah left for the restaurant, each step accompanied by a cold wind that seemed to blow insecurity straight into her heart. It was supposed to be her day off, but after the previous day's tardiness, she'd decided to offer herself for any extra shifts, hoping to secure additional pay. She desperately needed the money for a lawyer, or the custody battle would be even harder than it already was. When she arrived, the manager, still uneasy about the episode with Michael, crossed his arms and looked at her. "I thought you were off today, but if you're sure you want to work, I won't say no. We've got a corporate dinner later. You can stay until closing." Sarah nodded, relieved to have a chance to salvage her tarnished image. She stored her bag in the locker and put on her apron. The start of her shift was uneventful, though she noticed some customers whispering and glancing at her with curious expressions. It was hard to tell whether their stares stemmed from rumors Michael had spread or simple curiosity about the previous day's scene. Pushing aside her anxious thoughts, Sarah focused on the orders. She needed to maintain professionalism, knowing her job was on thin ice. Later in the afternoon, while clearing dishes, she heard the deep voice of the manager talking to someone near the entrance. She turned and saw a man in simple clothes but with a confident demeanor, carrying boxes of fresh produce. It was the same man who had witnessed the commotion the day before, the one who had worn a hat at the counter. He wasn't wearing the hat now, but there was something unmistakable about his calm posture. Sarah felt her cheeks flush slightly, remembering how he had almost stepped in to help her. He didn't seem like just any customer. She observed their conversation from a distance. The manager appeared enthusiastic, discussing the quality of the produce and delivery details. That was when Ethan, she finally saw the name written on an order slip, mentioned that he would be supplying more organic vegetables to the restaurant. The manager smiled, pleased, and called Sarah over to help with the boxes. She approached, trying to appear indifferent, but her heart raced. Ethan nodded politely. "Good afternoon. Are you all right now?" The seemingly innocent question made Sarah's stomach twist. He was probably referring to what had happened the day before. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied, focusing on the boxes to avoid his gaze. After storing everything in the stockroom, Ethan ordered a coffee and sat at the same counter as the previous day, filling out a delivery form. Occasionally, his curious eyes flicked toward Sarah. She, on the other hand, kept herself busy cleaning tables and serving customers. If she were honest, she'd admit that part of her felt unsettled by his gaze. Not out of fear, but because she couldn't understand why a stranger seemed concerned about her life. As night fell, the restaurant began to fill up with guests arriving for the corporate dinner the manager had mentioned. Sarah, now in full stride, dashed between tables with her tray, taking orders and clearing plates. In the midst of her rush, she noticed a quick text from Jana. "Michael is spreading rumors around town that you're unstable and could cost the restaurant his business. Just wanted you to know and stay alert." Sarah read the message and felt her throat tighten. Michael wouldn't stop defaming her, and she feared the manager under pressure might fire her. As if that weren't enough, the corporate dinner was sponsored by one of Michael's partner companies. It didn't take long for whispers to circulate among the staff. Someone had said that if Sarah caused any negative atmosphere with the clients, it might jeopardize the contract. Her desperation grew. She had to perform flawlessly to keep her job. Toward the end of her shift, the manager pulled Sarah aside. His face was a mixture of irritation and pity. "Look, you're an excellent worker, but I can't risk the restaurant's reputation. You need to sort out these personal issues, understand? I don't want to make changes to the team, but if this keeps up, I won't have a choice." Sarah swallowed hard, fighting back tears. She had to keep her dignity intact. As the manager walked away, she leaned against the kitchen wall, breathless. It felt like the beginning of the end. If Michael continued to sabotage her image, she would lose her job. Without work, fighting for custody of Noah would become even more impossible. At that moment, someone cleared their throat nearby. Sarah turned and saw Ethan leaning against the freezer, pulling out the final delivery forms for the manager. His expression was concerned, as if he'd overheard the conversation. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help hearing." Sarah took a deep breath, ready to refuse any offer of help, hating the idea of appearing weak. Before she could speak, Ethan pulled a card from his pocket. "I know a lawyer. If you need someone good, he's the best I know." Stunned, Sarah stared at the card in her hand. She recognized the name. Dr. Carter, a renowned attorney and undoubtedly expensive. She looked up, her eyes wide. "I can't afford this, and I don't take charity," she said defensively, as if to shut down any chance of dependency. Ethan remained calm. "This isn't charity. It's a chance. I know his work. He can guide you. Think about it." To make matters worse, as she returned to the floor, she overheard a comment from one of the corporate guests. Michael had hinted that if she stayed employed, the organic produce contract might be canceled. Overwhelmed, she pulled out her phone to try calling her old lawyer, only to remember she had no credit left. She didn't even have the strength to cry. She needed to act fast. Ethan finished his paperwork and noticed her despair. Without forcing conversation, he quietly placed the card on the counter and gestured for her to take it. "It's just a referral. No obligations. But if you want to keep fighting for your son, it might be worth considering." She said nothing. When the corporate dinner ended, the The manager dismissed Sarah with a hesitant nod. Stepping out of the restaurant, she felt the cold night air sting her face. The wind seemed to whisper that she was alone in her battle against Michael. But Noah's image awaited her at home, and she couldn't afford to give up. She needed help, even as her mistrust screamed at her not to rely on strangers. Then she saw Ethan standing by his truck as if waiting for her. He didn't say anything at first, but his calm eyes asked the question she dreaded. "Are you going to keep trying alone, or will you accept help?" Sarah looked away, recalling everything she'd endured in recent months. Her pride urged her to refuse, but the urgent need to save Noah's custody begged her to accept. For the first time that night, she felt cornered. She glanced at Dr. Carter's card in Ethan's hand and finally reached out to take it, saying nothing. He gave a small, understanding smile, sensing she'd made her choice. Sarah's heart was torn between humiliation and hope. She didn't know who Ethan really was, but something about him made her believe he might not be just another opportunist in her life. As she held the card, she realized it represented more than just a phone number. It was a chance to fight again. If not for herself, then for Noah. She had to win the legal battle before Michael buried her in slander. Sarah stood in front of Ethan, her heart torn between pride and the need for a fighting chance for Noah. He offered Dr. Carter's card, and she felt this decision could change everything. Sarah stared at the small card bearing Dr. Carter's name, feeling a shiver run down her spine. It seemed like another step into the unknown, though the only certainty she had was the need to fight for her son. After a few seconds of silence, she raised her head toward Ethan, who was waiting with a calm and steady expression. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her wounded pride, but also the urgent necessity of grasping any chance to turn the custody battle for Noah in her favor. Without saying a word, she tucked the card into her pocket. That night, sleep eluded her. Noah's face haunted her, paired with the image of Michael watching her, always one step ahead. She needed to find the money to keep her lawyer and was now even considering consulting a more expensive but reputed attorney. She woke up before the alarm, heading straight to the kitchen, where dishes from the dinner she hadn't had the energy to clean cluttered the sink. Her eyes fell on the bills scattered across the wooden table, a sharp reminder of how hard life had become. When she took Noah to school, she couldn't help but notice he was quieter than usual. The boy, who typically loved sharing stories about cartoons he'd watched or chatting about his friends, walked with his head down, clutching his mother's hand tightly. A lump in Sarah's throat grew heavier. She wanted her son to have a normal life, free from the pressures of a custody battle. She kissed his forehead softly and gave him an encouraging smile, though inside she was falling apart. After watching him enter the school, she stopped by a public phone booth since her cell phone was out of credit. She stared at the card and dialed Dr. Carter's number. The call began with a formal secretary asking for her details and transferring her. Then, a calm male voice came through. "Good morning. This is Dr. Carter. Who am I speaking with?" "I'm Sarah Turner. Ethan referred me to you. I'm not sure if you were expecting my call." "Ah, yes, I received something about that. Would you like to schedule an appointment?" His tone was neutral but not indifferent, carrying a hint of empathy that gave Sarah a sliver of hope. She confirmed the appointment for the following afternoon, already dreading the anxiety of facing it. She thanked him and hung up, her heart pounding. The mere thought of stepping into a fancy office without even enough money for an initial retainer made her apprehensive. But Ethan had said Dr. Carter could help her. She had to trust him. The next day, still feeling shaky, she took a bus to the city center. She stepped off in front of a building with a mirrored facade, hoping the pristine appearance wouldn't contrast too starkly with her simple outfit. Inside, a receptionist directed her to the appropriate floor. The waiting area was decorated with plush chairs, artistic paintings, and minimalist decor. She felt small and out of place, as though the space belonged to a distant world. "Sarah Turner?" the secretary called, her professional smile unwavering. Sarah rose and followed her into Dr. Carter's office. The man, dressed in a suit, appeared to be in his 50s, with rectangular glasses and a serene expression. He extended his hand to greet her and motioned for her to sit in a comfortable chair opposite his large, dark wooden desk. "Ethan mentioned your situation briefly, but I'd like to hear it from you. How can I help?" Still hesitant, Sarah remained silent for a moment. Telling the whole story to a stranger hurt, but she had no choice. "I lost custody of my son Noah a few months ago. It's temporary, but my ex-husband, he has far more resources than I do, and he used them to harm me. I have a hearing coming up, but I can't afford to pay my current lawyer." She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I was desperate, not knowing what to do. Then Ethan, he gave me your card. But I can't afford a firm like yours. I don't want to take on debts I can't pay." Dr. Carter nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. And I know custody battles are about much more than money. First, I need to review the case files, the evidence you have, and what was presented at the previous hearing. Then we can decide how to proceed with fees. As it happens, part of it has already been covered as a retainer, but don't worry about that for now." Sarah blinked, confused. "A retainer? By who?" He smiled slightly, lifting his shoulders just enough to avoid giving a direct answer, though it was clear Ethan was behind it. She felt her face flush. Gratitude swelled, mixed with discomfort at feeling indebted to someone she barely knew. Dr. Carter broke the silence. "We can start today by reviewing your case documents. If you're willing, I'll ask some initial questions to develop a strategy, and rest assured, we won't make any moves without discussing them thoroughly." Sarah exhaled, her thanks barely audible. By the end of the meeting, she felt a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in weeks. Dr. Carter was firm, but displayed the empathy and expertise her case required. When she left the office, the overcast sky mirrored her conflicted emotions, relief mixed with uncertainty. She walked a few steps down the sidewalk, lost in thought, until someone called her name. It was Michael, leaning against the luxury car that symbolized his wealth. His smile was venomous. "So it's true. I heard you've been cozying up to a man much wealthier than you. Now you're even seeing a high-end lawyer." Sarah felt a simmering rage. She didn't want to argue, but Michael was provoking her on purpose. "You know what, Michael? I owe you no explanations," she said, her voice trembling. Before he could reply, she walked away, but she couldn't help hearing his mocking laughter followed by a muttered, "Sell out. You'll regret it." Turning the corner, her heart pounded with anxiety. It wasn't just the fear of being judged by the entire town. Michael had connections, and he wasn't above lying, bribing, or persuading anyone with his smooth talk. She needed to get home, to gather her thoughts, and figure out how to protect Noah. As she climbed the stairs of the modest building where she lived, she spotted a folded piece of paper under her door. With trembling hands, she picked it up. The handwritten note said only, "Give up, or it'll get worse." There was no signature, but she had no doubt it was connected to the custody battle. She bit her lip, swallowing the feeling of being cornered. Inside, she dropped her bag on the couch and called Jana, who answered almost immediately. "Jana, someone left a threatening note at my door," she said bluntly, her voice breaking. Her friend was shocked and urged her to go to the police, but Sarah feared that would only provoke Michael further. "Why won't he stop?" Sarah's voice cracked. "He already has temporary custody of Noah. I can't lose my son forever." Jana tried to reassure her, promising to come over later to talk. Sarah agreed and hung up, but the tears wouldn't stop. She sat on the floor, hugging her knees until the sound of wind against the window jolted her from her despair. The next morning, she resolved to talk to Ethan. She couldn't bear the thought of owing someone she barely knew, even if he had been the only one to extend a helping hand in her darkest hour. At work, she found Ethan in the back of the restaurant inspecting boxes of produce for the day's delivery. Pulling him aside, she went straight to the point. "So it was you who paid Dr. Carter's retainer?" Her tone was direct, her eyes narrowed with discomfort. Ethan nodded, calmly tucking a piece of paper into his bag. "Look, I appreciate it, but I can't accept it. I can't pay you back. Sarah, I did it because I believe no one should lose their child just because they can't afford to fight in court. I don't expect anything in return," Ethan replied, his voice steady. "If you want to work and repay me someday, fine. But don't give up on Noah because of money." Her face flushed. It was exactly what she needed to hear, yet it felt like she was losing control over her own life. "I don't know if I can trust you. I don't even really know who you are, Ethan." He tilted his head slightly as though he understood. "I'm just someone who believes people deserve a fair shot. I didn't become a farmer overnight. It took me years to get here, and I know how unfair the world can be to those without the means to defend themselves." Their conversation ended with a silence that, surprisingly, wasn't uncomfortable. Sarah returned to the restaurant floor, her mind racing. If she wanted to keep fighting, she needed Dr. Carter. And that inevitably meant accepting Ethan's involvement in her life. At the end of the day, exhausted, she boarded the last bus home. She watched the city pass through the grimy windows. At one point, she was overwhelmed by the feeling that Michael might be lurking. Perhaps it was paranoia, but she couldn't ignore the reality. He had made threats and wouldn't hesitate to act on them. As the bus approached her stop near her building, Sarah stood up and glanced out the window. Her heart sank. There it was, Michael's luxury car parked close to the sidewalk with its dark-tinted windows. The same car she'd seen that morning, the same car that haunted her since Michael had gained temporary custody of Noah. She stepped off the bus, her legs trembling, fumbling in her pockets for her house keys. Sarah walks toward her building, her pulse racing as she glances back at Michael's car parked nearby. She swallows hard, bracing herself for yet another confrontation. Sarah stepped off the bus and paused for a moment on the sidewalk, her eyes locking on Michael's car parked near her building's entrance. A chill ran down her spine. He was waiting for her, like a predator lying in wait for its prey. Despite the fear, she gathered her courage and walked with determined steps to confront her ex-husband. "What are you doing here, Michael?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady and mask her panic. He smiled coldly, not bothering to hide his arrogance. "I thought we had something to discuss. Or would you prefer I come up to your apartment?" "I've already told you I don't want you here. Stop stalking me," she replied, holding back the urge to shout. He shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "I'm only looking out for our son's well-being. I need to make sure you're not exposing Noah to unsuitable environments." Sarah clenched her fists, furious. Michael was pushing boundaries, trying to chip away at her dwindling confidence. Before the situation escalated into a public argument, she opened the building door and hurried up the steps to the lobby, ignoring Michael as he followed closely. Once inside, she turned to face him. "Listen, Michael, I'm not going to tolerate this harassment anymore. You already have temporary custody of Noah. What else do you want? To see me lose my job? Go hungry? How do you think I'm going to support our son if you keep sabotaging me like this?" He crossed his arms and let out a derisive laugh. "I want you to admit you're unfit to be a mother. Your instability is obvious to everyone. Why do you keep fighting instead of letting us live in peace?" Sarah's throat went dry as she realized the conversation had crossed a line. She needed to get away from him. Without another word, she asked him to leave the building and turn toward the elevator. Michael, however, couldn't resist throwing out one last jab before stepping out. "Let's see if you still think you can take care of Noah once you're fired." She pressed the elevator button repeatedly, fighting back the rising despair. When she heard the ground floor door close, she exhaled deeply. The constant battle was wearing her down. Back in her apartment, Sarah called Jana for solace. Her friend answered immediately, and Sarah recounted the encounter, her voice trembling. Jana tried to comfort her. "Stay calm, girl. Go to work tomorrow. Stay alert, but don't let Michael win by wearing you out." The next day, Sarah arrived at the restaurant, hoping her manager wasn't in a bad mood. But as she stepped into the staff entrance, she was summoned to his office. The man, though not harsh, wore a stern expression that made her uneasy. "I need to address some complaints I've received," he began, shuffling papers on his desk. "Apparently Michael's been spreading rumors around town that you're emotionally unstable. Some customers are worried about dining here because of it. You see the issue, don't you?" Sarah's stomach churned with indignation and shame. She had anticipated Michael's lies but never imagined they'd reach this level. "I swear I'm doing everything right. I'm punctual, efficient. Please, I can't lose this job." He sighed, scratching his beard. "I know you're a good waitress, but I can't allow personal problems to hurt the restaurant's reputation. Let's agree on this. Keep a low profile and try to resolve this situation outside of work. If I notice anything else affecting the business, I'll have to take drastic measures." Sarah bit her lip and nodded. She left the office feeling as if she were walking on eggshells, aware that Michael was succeeding in cornering her until she lost all financial stability. Throughout her shift, she worked diligently, taking orders and smiling politely, though her heart felt heavy. Despite her efforts, she couldn't escape the curious stares of some customers who seemed to know about the rumors spreading on local social media. By the end of the day, as she prepared to leave, Jana pulled her aside. On her phone, she showed Sarah a series of comments from a local forum, including absurd claims that Sarah had anger issues at work, was unreliable, and even a fabricated story that she'd been seen mistreating her own child. Tears stung Sarah's eyes, but she held them back. She needed to stay strong. "You're not alone," Jana assured her, hugging her. "I'm here for you." Just then, Sarah's phone rang. It was Dr. Carter. Without preamble, he informed her that the judge had reviewed Michael's recent requests and scheduled a new hearing in just a few days. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She would have to scramble to prove she was fit to keep Noah. Yet, at her current pace, she couldn't even afford the remainder of her attorney's fees. Despite the throbbing headache, she dried her face and pressed on. She stopped at a downtown cafe to inquire about a part-time job, desperate for extra income. The cozy space smelled of freshly roasted coffee, but the hesitation in the cafe owner's eyes unsettled her. "You really want this job? It's only a few hours a day and the pay isn't great," he warned, narrowing his eyes. "I need any income I can get," Sarah replied humbly. "I have a child to support." He nodded slowly, as if weighing his options. Then he made a comment that sent chills down her spine. "The truth is, I've heard rumors you might be problematic. That wouldn't disrupt my business, would it?" Her face burned with embarrassment. She denied the allegations, but the man remained hesitant, saying he needed time to think. Sarah left feeling humiliated, uncertain if she'd even get a response. As she walked through the cafe's main area, she noticed Ethan at the counter, ordering a coffee to go. He greeted her, and from her expression he could tell how poorly the interview had gone. "Need help?" he asked gently. Exhausted, Sarah forced a smile and said she'd manage. Thanking him quickly, she left, unwilling to share her humiliation. That evening, after a quick shower, her phone vibrated. She answered to hear only a distorted voice whispering, "Drop the custody fight if you don't want bigger problems." Panic gripped her. Before she could respond, the call ended. Trembling, she checked the door locks, placed a chair under the doorknob, and decided to sleep on the couch, fearing that Michael, or someone working for him, might take things further. Wrapped in a thin blanket, Sarah thought of Noah's joy when chasing soap bubbles in the schoolyard, or how he insisted he'd grow up to help her pay the bills. The longing tightened her chest, accompanied by a gnawing guilt for feeling so powerless. Eventually, exhaustion overcame her, and she fell asleep with tears on her cheeks. The next morning, though still shaken, Sarah knew time wouldn't wait. She headed to work, finding Ethan there again, delivering fresh goods and chatting with the manager about a delivery mix-up. When Ethan saw her, he gave a reserved smile but noticed her weary demeanor. "Are you okay?" he asked discreetly as she jotted down items to check. "I'm trying," she replied honestly. It was all she could do. Before they could exchange more words, a staff member handed Sarah an envelope from the court. Her heart raced as she opened it to find confirmation of the upcoming hearing, now only days away. Her breathing quickened. She needed to prepare immediately or risk Michael winning outright. Later, near the end of her shift, Ethan invited her to lunch. She hesitated, wary of getting too close, but felt a deep need to speak with someone who wouldn't judge her. She agreed, and they went to a small restaurant a few blocks away from prying eyes. Between quiet bites, Sarah poured out her struggles, the slander, the threats, the constant fear of losing not just Noah but her dignity. Ethan listened intently, never interrupting. At one point, his brow furrowed as if recalling a painful memory. "I understand your pain, Sarah. I went through something similar when I lost someone close years ago. It was different, but the emptiness and injustice, it's hard to move forward." He didn't elaborate and Sarah didn't press, but his somber tone made her feel less alone in her misery. After lunch, Sarah thanked him for his support. She was wary of growing too attached to Ethan but appreciated the temporary relief from her burdens. He met her gaze with genuine empathy and assured her he was there if she needed help. They parted ways with a handshake, and Sarah headed to the bus stop. Before boarding, she checked her phone and found a new text message. Opening it, her heart sank as she read, "If you go to the hearing, you'll regret it." Her legs trembled as she scanned the area, expecting to see Michael or one of his cronies lurking nearby. The fear hit her full force, turning the rest of the day into a haze of anxiety and uncertainty. Sarah was sitting on the bed, staring at the phone where the threatening message received the night before glowed. "If you go to the hearing, you'll regret it." For a moment, she considered what it meant. Her heart felt as heavy as lead, but it still beat steadily. She had to stay strong. If she gave in to the blackmail, she would lose Noah forever. Even though fear coursed through her veins, she decided she wouldn't be intimidated. In the hallway of the small apartment, Noah played with the few toy cars he had, making engine noises with his mouth. His innocence was her greatest comfort. She had to protect him at all costs. Standing up, she ran her hand over her face and took a deep breath. She couldn't show weakness in front of her son. Later in the morning, while preparing a hot tea to calm her nerves, the landline phone rang. For a second, fear overtook her, imagining it might be another threat. But she took a breath and answered. It was Dr. Carter, confirming the hearing date and asking her to come by his office later to finalize the details. Before hanging up, he advised her to remain discreet, making it clear that Michael was working behind the scenes to sway the judge. "I'll stay strong," Sarah assured him, her voice slightly trembling. "Good. Trust our strategy, but stay cautious. If anything unusual happens, call me," Dr. Carter replied, his tone serious. Hanging up, Sarah made an effort to calm herself. This new hearing felt like her last chance to prove she could raise Noah. She wanted to cry from exhaustion but looked at her son who, not understanding half of what was going on, gazed at her curiously. She swallowed her tears, forcing a smile that, with any luck, didn't reveal the inner turmoil. Around lunchtime, Jana arrived at the apartment. Sarah left Noah playing in the living room and invited her friend to sit at the table where notes and legal papers were scattered. Jana had an apprehensive expression but radiated a hint of excitement. Without preamble, she opened her bag and pulled out a crumpled receipt. "I got this at the restaurant, left on the table where Michael was talking to someone I didn't recognize. It's a payment receipt, but the amounts are unusually high. And look here, it says consulting services, but it doesn't add up." On that date, Michael claimed he was traveling for a supposed meeting. Sarah's eyes widened as she examined the paper. At first, she didn't fully understand its significance, but she realized it might prove some financial irregularity, or at least question Michael's honesty. "Do you think I can use this in court?" she asked, a wave of hope washing over her. "I'm not sure it's enough yet, but if we can find more evidence that he's involved in fraud, it could undermine his credibility." Jana explained. Sarah carefully stored the receipt. It was a fragile thread of hope. She needed to see if there was any connection to Michael's dealings that could serve as the key to discrediting him in front of the judge. If she could prove any illicit scheme, she could reveal that Michael wasn't the exemplary figure he pretended to be. Later, Sarah decided she couldn't just wait for something to fall into her lap. She had to act. She planned to go that night to Michael's office, or wherever he might keep documents, in hopes of finding more evidence. Jana tried to dissuade her, reminding her of the risks, but Sarah felt she had no alternatives. With the hearing approaching, time was running out to prove Michael wasn't as honest as he appeared. That evening, Sarah left Noah with Jana and headed to Michael's office, located in a commercial building downtown. The plan was simple yet risky. Take advantage of the office being nearly empty at night to search for anything linking Michael to the suspicious receipt. As the sun set and darkness cloaked the streets, Sarah's heart raced with every step. When she arrived, the building's front desk was about to close. Pretending she'd forgotten an important document, she convinced the elderly doorman, who seemed ready to clock out, to let her up quickly. He warned her she only had a few minutes before the night alarm would be activated. Sarah nodded, forcing a nervous smile. She climbed the stairs, her heart pounding. Each step felt like a descent into a labyrinth of painful memories. The time she believed in her marriage to Michael, her pregnancy with Noah, the relationship's deterioration, and the constant fear of failing as a mother. The dimly lit hallway stretched before her. She spotted Michael's office door, and to her surprise, it was ajar. She entered cautiously. The office was dark, illuminated only by a faint lamp at the reception desk. She spotted the door to Michael's private office. It seemed dangerous, but she was determined. As she reached for the doorknob, muffled noises stopped her in her tracks. Someone else was there. She considered turning back, but courage, or desperation, pushed her forward. Her goal was clear: find something that could save her at the hearing. The moment she stepped into the room, a heavy thud landed on her back. She fell to the floor, startled, and saw a burly man with a stern expression, likely a security guard or one of Michael's allies. He grabbed her arm, demanding to know why she was there. Sarah, unable to explain, struggled to break free. "Let me go!" she shouted, breathless and scared but resolute. "What are you doing here, huh?" the man retorted, tightening his grip. Just as panic began to take over, she heard firm footsteps in the hallway. A clattering sound, perhaps a dropped key, distracted the man. Sarah seized the moment, pulling free and sprinting toward the door, nearly tripping over her own feet. Fear burned in her chest, but she thought of Noah and the incriminating receipt in her bag. She couldn't let them catch her. In the lobby, she saw the doorman making way for another visitor. As Sarah dashed past, the visitor's silhouette caught her eye. Ethan. It seemed he was arriving on business, or perhaps sensing something might happen. His eyes filled with concern as he saw her panic. Before she could say a word, the burly man emerged behind her, now more cautious. Ethan quickly assessed the situation and stepped between Sarah and the man. "Is there a problem here?" Ethan asked, his tone firm in a way Sarah had never heard before. The man sized Ethan up, apparently deciding it wasn't worth causing a scene in the lobby, and backed off. Disguising his anger, he simply pointed at Sarah. This woman was caught snooping where she shouldn't. Before Ethan could respond, Sarah tugged his arm, breathless. She wanted to leave as quickly as possible. They exited to the sidewalk, still feeling the security guards and doorman's suspicious gazes. The sky was dark, lit only by a few streetlights. Once far enough away, Sarah stopped, hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, trying to check her arm for injuries. She nodded, attempting to appear strong, though her legs trembled. Briefly, she explained her attempt to find evidence incriminating Michael and how she'd nearly been caught. That's when she noticed the tear in her sleeve where the man had grabbed her and felt a throbbing in her shoulder. Despite this, the relief of escaping overshadowed her pain. "Sarah, why didn't you tell me you were planning this? It was far too dangerous," Ethan admonished, his voice firm but laced with concern. She swallowed hard, ashamed to admit she needed help, and more ashamed to confess she'd risked her safety in desperation. Struggling to articulate, she managed an explanation. "I'm being threatened. Michael. He wants me to give up custody. But I need the evidence. I have to show who he really is." Ethan took a deep breath, understanding her desperation. Without further judgment, he led her to his truck parked a block away, offering to drive her home, or to the hospital if necessary. Out of pride, she declined the hospital. She just needed some ice for her shoulder. On the ride back, she remained silent, her mind racing over the events. She thought about the receipt in her bag, the dull ache in her arm, and most of all, the approaching hearing. She thanked Ethan, insisting she didn't want to drag him into her problems, but he gave a slight smile, saying he understood. Back at the apartment, Sarah told Jana what had happened at Michael's office, showing her the torn sleeve and the bruise forming on her arm. Jana was shocked and urged her to be careful. Still, Sarah felt a glimmer of relief. She finally had documents that seemed suspicious, proof that Michael might be involved in something shady. In just a few hours, she would stand before the judge, presenting everything she'd gathered. Whether Michael would find out in time was another story. She had to remain steadfast. Before bed, she hugged Noah, who slept soundly on a makeshift bed in the living room, and whispered that she loved him more than anything. Then she sat on the couch, the bag with the documents beside her, and let the tension escape in quiet, silent tears. If anything fueled her courage, it was her deep love for her son. Heart racing, Sarah escapes the office but takes with her a photo on her phone of a file that seems to implicate Michael. She trembles at the thought of exposing it. Sarah spent a nearly sleepless night poring over the photographs she had taken in the warehouse. On her phone screen were images of documents signed by Michael containing figures and names unfamiliar to her but which appeared to obscure some sort of fraud. She zoomed in on every detail, trying to decipher the acronyms and stamps. Even though she didn't understand all the formalities, it was clear that if these documents were presented in court, they could put her ex-husband in serious trouble. The thought of finally having an advantage gave her a sliver of hope, but the fear of retaliation grew with every passing second. By morning, she tried to mask her exhaustion, brewing a bitter cup of coffee while stirring it absent-mindedly. From the next room, she could hear Noah playing. The innocence in his laughter tugged at her heart, because she knew any misstep on her part could have devastating consequences for him. Dr. Carter needed to see those files as soon as possible, but Sarah feared Michael discovering their whereabouts. The memory of the burly security guard at her office the previous night made her body tense involuntarily. When Noah wandered into the kitchen, still groggy, Sarah forced a smile to convey calm. He clung to her leg, asking for cereal, and she obliged. Yet she noticed he seemed unusually quiet. Occasionally, he asked about his father, despite knowing their relationship was strained. Sarah always reassured him not to worry. The child felt the tension but didn't fully grasp the gravity of the situation. Later, while she was washing dishes, her phone vibrated on the counter. Drying her hands quickly, she answered, recognizing Jana's anxious voice. Her friend explained that she had seen Michael loitering near the restaurant before it opened, asking questions about Sarah's routine. Jana was worried. Michael appeared determined to find out whether Sarah had something incriminating. Sarah's heart sank. Clearly, Michael suspected she had escaped with something significant. Despite the anxiety, Sarah resolved not to alter her routine that day. She needed to show she wasn't afraid. After getting dressed and helping Noah prepare to stay with Jana, she headed to the restaurant. On the way, she mulled over what to do with the photos, whether to hand them over to Dr. Carter immediately or keep a copy in a safe place. If Michael acted first, he might destroy the evidence, or worse, target her or Noah. During her shift, Ethan arrived with a delivery of fresh produce, as he often did. His expression shifted when he saw Sarah pale and jittery. Seizing a quiet moment, he approached her. "Are you okay? You seem on edge. Did something happen?" She hesitated but ended up confiding about the warehouse, the documents she had photographed, and her fears of Michael's retaliation. Ethan listened intently, his brow furrowed with concern. "What about the lawyer?" he asked. "Shouldn't you hand everything over to him and let him handle it?" "That's the plan," she admitted. "I'm just trying to ensure Michael doesn't get to it first. You know how much influence he has in this town." Ethan considered this before suggesting she and Noah stay at his farm for a while. The property was expansive and well-staffed, making it harder for Michael to approach unnoticed. Though it was a tempting offer for safety, Sarah hesitated, worried about appearing overly reliant on Ethan. "We'll see," she replied softly, trying not to let her voice falter. Ethan didn't push the matter, his understanding gaze unwavering. By the end of the day, Sarah left the restaurant, noticing Michael's car parked across the street. She recognized his silhouette but pretended not to, walking firmly toward home. Once there, she found Noah cheerful, sharing stories about his afternoon with Jana and showing her a drawing he had made. It depicted Sarah, Noah, and a giant sun, a hopeful symbol of brighter days. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she swallowed them back. She had to ensure that vibrant future for her son, no matter the cost. The following morning, Dr. Carter called, requesting she bring the evidence to his office. With her heart pounding, she boarded the first bus and made her way to the mirrored building downtown. After a brief wait, Dr. Carter welcomed her, motioning for her to sit as he observed her with an expression of deep concern. "What have you found?" he asked. Sarah handed over her phone, detailing everything about the warehouse. Dr. Carter examined the images carefully, zooming in and jotting down notes. His expression shifted between surprise and determination. "This is serious," he said. "These documents involve massive sums. If presented correctly, they could seriously damage Michael's credibility. But we must be cautious. Don't discuss this publicly, understood?" She nodded, her anxiety palpable. The lawyer explained that he could request judicial protection for her, but doing so might tip Michael off, giving him time to cover his tracks or manipulate others. It was a delicate balance, and Sarah understood, though she feared what might happen if Michael discovered their plans. Leaving Dr. Carter's office later, Sarah bumped into Ethan, who claimed to be in the area for a business meeting. He invited her for coffee, sensing she needed someone to talk to. Over cappuccinos in a small cafe, she confided in him again, explaining the lawyer's findings and the heightened threats from Michael. "Which is why I still think you should come to the farm," Ethan insisted, leaning forward. "If he tries anything there, we'll have people to help. It'll be much easier to monitor who comes and goes." Though reluctant, Sarah's maternal instincts told her it might be the safest option. She agreed, and they discussed the logistics of her temporary stay. That night, as she packed a small bag, Sarah's emotions were conflicted. While she felt a measure of relief, she also couldn't ignore how close she was becoming to Ethan. Her guard was up. She couldn't afford to get hurt again. The next day, with Jana's help, she and Noah arrived at the farm. The boy was enthralled by the open space, animals, and fields, a stark contrast to their cramped apartment. Ethan showed them around, introducing them to the staff, who greeted them warmly. A modest yet comfortable room awaited them in the main house. Sarah felt a strange mix of calm and unease. By evening, the staff spotted a suspicious car parked outside the property. When approached, the driver sped off. Sarah knew it was Michael's doing, another reminder of the danger looming over them. Later, as she prepared Noah's bedtime, her phone buzzed with another anonymous threat. Michael's message was explicit. Any attempt to use the evidence against him would have dire consequences. Trembling, Sarah closed the door firmly, determined to see this through despite her growing fear. Sarah woke up with the first ray of sunlight streaming through the window of the makeshift room in the farmhouse. Still half asleep, it took her a few moments to remember she wasn't in her old apartment but in a place that, although temporary, promised to be a sanctuary. The smell of freshly brewed coffee reached her, mixed with the sound of chickens scratching outside. In the next room, Noah was still asleep, clutching his pillow, his breathing peaceful. Perhaps for the first time in a long while, he felt safe. Leaving her son to rest, Sarah got dressed and followed the comforting aroma down the hallway. Passing through the main living room, she spotted Ethan speaking with 2 employees about the grain delivery. He turned to her and gave her a small but sincere smile. His eyes seemed to assure her she was among friends, yet in her mind lingered the uncertainty of how long this refuge would last and what Michael might do to harm her. "Good morning? Did you sleep well?" Ethan asked, gesturing to the table where warm bread, butter, and a jug of coffee awaited. "Better than I have in a long time," Sarah admitted, attempting a smile. "The silence here is different from the city. It feels safer." She didn't mention the fears that still lingered deep within her, but Ethan caught the hesitation in her voice. Gently, he invited her to sit as the employees finished organizing supplies on the porch. He mentioned she could help wherever she felt comfortable, assuring her he didn't want her to feel out of place or useless. Sarah thanked him, explaining she was still anxious about the upcoming court hearing and needed to stay in constant contact with Dr. Carter. When Noah woke up, he was greeted with a bowl of fresh fruit and a glass of milk. The sparkle in his eyes as he looked out at the sprawling yard, filled with places to run and explore, warmed Sarah's heart. It had been so long since she'd seen him this excited. He squealed with delight upon discovering a small orchard and some animals. Vicente, one of the farm's senior workers, approached and offered to give the boy a tour, teaching him how to hold a rabbit without hurting it. While Noah explored, Sarah stood on the porch, watching the scene. It was a moment of calm amidst the storm, but she knew Michael could appear at any time or send a message that would shatter the peace. A few minutes later, Ethan joined her, mentioning that Dr. Carter had called earlier, asking her to review some documents to strengthen her defense strategy. She retrieved her phone from her bag and returned the call. The conversation was brief, but crucial. The lawyer informed her that Michael was leveraging influential contacts and seemed willing to involve local politicians to complicate the trial. This meant the legal pressure was intensifying, and Sarah needed to be even more vigilant. Trying not to crumble, she took a deep breath. Sensing her distress, Ethan suggested spending the morning showing Noah around the farm. Perhaps by distracting herself, she could better process her next steps. Together they followed a path that led past a large red barn where a few cows grazed lazily. Noah ran ahead, enthralled by the horses, while Sarah tried to keep up with his pace, exchanging small talk with Ethan. "I never imagined a farm could be this big," she remarked, gazing at the green fields that seemed to stretch to the base of the distant mountains. "I inherited part of it from my father, but I've worked hard to expand it. In recent years, I've invested in more sustainable practices. I want this place to be productive without damaging the land." Sarah felt a sense of warmth as she listened to Ethan talk about his journey. He didn't go into detail, but there was a tone of dedication and humility in his words. Perhaps that subtle contrast, his status as a wealthy farmer with a genuinely modest heart, was what she found quietly appealing. However, not everything was serene. Before they could return, one of the employees pulled Ethan aside, informing him that someone had sabotaged the tires of a tractor during the night. Ethan's expression immediately darkened. Hearing this, Sarah's stomach churned. She knew there was only one person who stood to gain from causing trouble here: Michael. This meant her ex-husband was willing to resort to underhanded tactics, including invading the farm. Ethan gathered his employees and decided to tighten security around the property. He wasn't about to make a scene, but made it clear he wouldn't tolerate further intrusions. By evening, Sarah helped prepare dinner, making a simple stew as a distraction. Noah, still elated, regaled everyone with stories of how he'd learned to pet a horse without startling it. There were laughs and light-hearted conversations in the kitchen, briefly lifting the tension. But deep down, Sarah couldn't shake the lingering fear. She was happy to see her son smile, but dreaded the possibility of Michael showing up and ruining everything. As night fell, Dr. Carter called again with an urgent update. The court hearing might be moved up. Rumors suggested Michael was pressuring the system to expedite proceedings, hoping Sarah wouldn't have enough time to prepare. What he didn't anticipate, perhaps, was that she already had a dossier ready, complete with incriminating documents she'd uncovered. Her hand trembled as she held the phone, fearful of Michael's manipulative power but determined to remain composed. After the call, she went to find Noah, discovering him on the porch with Vicente, who was recounting old tales about the farm, stories of storms that had devastated crops and nights spent rescuing animals in the rain. Noah listened intently, his legs swinging over the edge of the chair. The scene was so tranquil that for a moment, Sarah forgot about the looming threats. Ethan soon called her for a private conversation in the main living room. Sitting on the worn leather couch, his expression was serious. "I've dealt with people bent on revenge before, but this Michael of yours takes it to another level. Sabotaged equipment, prowled around the farm, spread rumors. Do you think he's capable of worse?" Sarah nodded, her voice steady but somber. "Honestly, I wouldn't put anything past him. He's furious because he knows I can expose his corruption in court. If he loses, he won't just lose Noah. He might face criminal charges." Ethan rubbed his temple thoughtfully before sighing. "Then we need to protect you and your son. Tomorrow morning I want you to go to the police station with one of my men to file a report about the vandalism. It might not lead anywhere, but at least it'll create a record. We can't let Michael think he's untouchable." She smiled, touched by his unwavering support. It had been months since anyone had stood by her without expecting anything in return. Midway through their discussion, Jana called to warn her about malicious rumors spreading about Sarah, likely instigated by Michael, who was now talking about taking urgent measures to protect Noah. It sounded like pure manipulation. Sarah thanked her friend, hung up, and steeled herself. She needed to be ready. Later, as the day wound down, Sarah and Noah settled into their modest but cozy room. The cool night breeze drifted through the window, accompanied by the distant hum of crickets and the occasional lowing of cows. Noah, drowsy, remarked that he loved the farm and asked if they could stay forever. With a lump in her throat, Sarah explained that it was only a temporary solution, but she promised to work toward giving them a better home soon. Nothing was guaranteed, but she had to nurture his hope. Unable to sleep, she stepped outside onto the porch, hugging herself against the cool night air. Her thoughts swirled, the sabotage, the rumors, the mounting legal pressure. It felt like a nightmare with no end in sight. Still, she had to hold on to faith. It was the only way to face the coming weeks. Under the soft glow of the moon, she gazed out at the darkened fields, reflecting on how drastically her life had changed. From a debt-ridden, fearful waitress to someone now clinging to a shred of courage she hadn't known she possessed, all for the sake of keeping Noah safe and proving she could be a good mother. Her reverie was interrupted by a noise near the farm's main gate. Vicente approached, flashlight in hand. Both frowned as they noticed a car parked there, its headlights casting beams inward. For a moment, Sarah froze, dreading it might be another act of sabotage or a threat. Then, driven by instinct, she stepped forward, leaving the porch light behind to get a clearer view. She recognized the silhouette almost immediately, the way the man carried himself, his arrogant stance. Her heart raced as fear surged like an alarm. He didn't come closer, but there was no mistaking who it was. Sarah, standing at the edge of the porch, saw Michael at the gate, his figure illuminated by the car's lights. He stared directly at her, his smile radiating a sinister confidence. Sarah shuddered at the sight of Michael standing at the farm gate, wearing that smug smile that haunted her. For a long moment, she remained still, unsure whether to retreat or advance. On the other side, the man stood firm, the car's headlights illuminating part of his face. Vicente, the veteran worker, approached Sarah, ready for anything. But Michael, noticing the presence of others, made no attempt to approach. He simply turned around, got into his car, and sped off down the dirt road, kicking up a cloud of dust. With her heart still racing, Sarah returned to the main house. She found Noah sitting in the living room, groggy, asking what had happened. She reassured him, saying it was just someone who was already leaving. He seemed to accept the answer, though his childish curiosity longed for more details. Ethan, who had noticed the commotion, approached cautiously, his face clouded with concern. "It was Michael, wasn't it?" he asked quietly. Sarah nodded. She had to contain herself to avoid showing the panic she felt. Her greatest fear was that this visit was just the prelude to something more sinister. "He didn't come in, he just stood at the gate. Then he left," she said, trying to sound calm. "We'll increase security. I don't want you feeling unprotected here," Ethan declared firmly. "Don't worry, I won't let anything happen to you." Sarah nodded, grateful for his determination, though an inner voice reminded her that Michael was cunning. It wouldn't be so simple to keep him at bay. It was only a matter of time before he found a weak spot to exploit. The next morning, Dr. Carter called before sunrise with news that brought a mix of relief and tension. They had obtained a temporary injunction granting shared custody of Noah until the final hearing. This meant that for now, Sarah wouldn't lose her son immediately, but it wasn't a complete victory, just a necessary breather to reorganize and, most importantly, demonstrate her ability to provide stability for the boy. If all goes well, and we present evidence of Michael's misconduct, you could even secure full custody. But it's too early to celebrate. Be prepared, he won't stop, Dr. Carter warned. Gripping the phone tightly, Sarah felt her knees weaken with relief. Just knowing Noah wouldn't be ripped away from her overnight was progress. She thanked the lawyer, wiping away a tear that insisted on falling. When she hung up, she found Ethan in the kitchen making coffee. He didn't ask for details, but Sarah's expression revealed there was news. Perhaps good news for the first time in a long while. She quickly explained that, thanks to the injunction, Noah would remain with her until the final decision. Ethan smiled and handed her a cup of coffee as if the simple gesture symbolized his support. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. "This gives you more time to get things in order." It was then that Ethan mentioned an idea that had been on his mind for some time: opening a small bakery on the farm. He explained there was an old, unused barn near the orchard that could be renovated to serve as a space for an artisanal bakery or pastry shop. This way, Sarah could have a stable income, showing the court that she was not only working to support herself, but also investing in something of her own. "But I wouldn't even know where to start," she replied, sipping her coffee. "You've got a talent for sweets, don't you? I've heard your cakes and pies are fantastic. Remember when you made that orange cake for Noah?" Ethan smiled encouragingly. "Plus, we have fresh ingredients here, interested customers, and plenty of people coming by to buy our organic produce." Sarah remembered that she did, in fact, enjoy baking. It was one of the few skills that brought her joy. She loved testing new recipes and seeing the happiness of those who tasted her creations. Still, the idea of starting her own business seemed too distant, almost impossible. Yet the suggestion brought a glimmer of hope. If it worked, it would demonstrate far greater financial independence than her current job as a waitress, which could weigh in her favor during the custody decision. On the other hand, she feared the malicious tongues accusing her of taking advantage of Ethan. That pressure had loomed ever since she moved to the farm. Michael would undoubtedly spread the idea that she had seduced a wealthy man just to gain favors and escape her debts. Yet the chance to start over spoke louder. During lunch, Ethan took Sarah to see the barn he mentioned. It was a spacious place with sturdy wooden beams, though cobwebs clung to the corners, and a musty smell lingered from being closed for so long. Large windows, if cleaned, would allow plenty of natural light. Sarah walked around imagining where she could place counters, ovens, and a display case for customers. Ideas began bubbling up. "Do you think it could work?" she asked, looking at Ethan. "If you really want it, I believe it could be a success. This area needs a place like this, and everyone loves fresh pastries and bread, especially if they're made with quality ingredients. We can renovate it little by little." Sarah smiled shyly, almost forgetting her problems. She felt that if she seized this opportunity, She could prove to the judge, and more importantly to herself, that she had value, that she wasn't just a desperate woman chasing someone else's money. Still, Michael's shadow lingered. He wouldn't stop trying to ruin her reputation. By the end of the day, she resolved to push forward with the bakery idea, even as whispers of Michael's schemes reached her ears. With every step forward, she clung to her determination, vowing to turn the barn into a sanctuary for her and Noah's future, no matter what challenges lay ahead. In the past few days, Sarah's life seemed to revolve around keeping track of Noah's every step, managing tight finances, and working tirelessly to transform the bakery's warehouse into something tangible. Yet, her mind kept returning to the looming court hearing. She spent sleepless nights combing through every document she had against Michael, scrutinizing every detail to strengthen her defense. Her goal was simple yet desperate: leave no room for Michael to separate her from Noah forever. One afternoon, after a quick trip to buy baking supplies, Sarah returned to the farm and found Noah sitting under the shade of a large tree, his legs swinging idly. In the boy's eyes was a sad glimmer that tugged at her heart. He held a crumpled drawing of a little house, a mother, and a father. Sarah's stomach churned when she noticed the smudged paint marks, as if the child had tried to erase one of the figures. "Hi, sweetheart. What's wrong?" she asked gently, approaching him cautiously. Noah looked up, his tearful eyes shining. The little boy let out a shaky sigh before replying, "Dad said you don't care about me. He says if you really did, you wouldn't have taken me so far from him, and that all you care about is making money with the farmer." Sarah felt a wave of indignation mixed with sorrow. Michael was still poisoning Noah's mind, weaving lies to leave him confused and insecure. She knelt down, placing her hands on his small shoulders, her tone soft but resolute. "Never believe that, my love. I love you more than anything. You're here because it's safe, because we need to prove we can live well. It's not easy, but we're in this together." The boy just nodded, fighting back tears. Sarah pulled him into a firm hug, trying to convey all the protection she wanted to give him. Inside, her anger against Michael grew. It reminded her of the countless times he had used words as weapons to manipulate her in the past. Now, he was doing the same to Noah, and she couldn't allow it to continue. When Ethan came by to discuss the warehouse renovation, Sarah struggled to focus on his words. She responded with monosyllables, her mind preoccupied with the injustice of seeing her son torn between his father's lies and the love she fought to show every day. Ethan noticed her distress and asked what was wrong. Hesitant, she revealed that Michael was filling Noah's head with falsehoods. Ethan pressed his lips together, agreeing that it was time to take action. No matter how cautious Sarah was, Michael had crossed into dangerous territory, attacking the psyche of a child. Later that day, Jana called urgently, saying she had seen Michael with a group of influential locals, including business people and politicians. She mentioned that Michael was spinning a narrative that Ethan and Sarah were building a fake bakery front to deceive the judge. Sarah's chest burned with anger. All her efforts, every penny spent on renovations, all her dedication to learning about ingredients and recipes could be ruined by malicious rumors. She barely managed to end the call, her hands trembling with indignation. At that moment, Noah ran into the house, frightened, saying he saw someone standing near the gate, staring at him in a strange way. Sarah froze, fearing it was another one of Michael's schemes to intimidate them. She felt a surge of determination. She couldn't wait for him to inflict more damage. She needed to confront him directly. "Please watch Noah," she asked Jana, who was visiting as she grabbed her bag. "I won't let him keep acting like he owns everything." In town, Sarah found out where Michael typically met with his allies. He was at a cafe near the city hall, surrounded by a group of businessmen. Taking a deep breath, her heart racing, she headed inside. When she entered, Michael's face lit up with a smug smile, clearly pleased to see her on the verge of losing her composure. Well, look who decided to show up," he said. raising a cup of coffee as the others at the table glanced over curiously. Sarah approached, every fiber of her being ready to defend herself and Noah. She wanted to scream but tried to maintain control. Even so, her voice trembled. "I know you've been manipulating our son, making him think I don't care about him. And I know you're spreading lies about the bakery, painting me as a gold digger." Michael shrugged with feigned indifference. "Interpret it however you want, but I'm just telling the truth. It's obvious you're using the farmer's money to fake stability. Do you really think a judge won't see through that?" Her fists clenched as she took a step closer. "Stop tormenting Noah. It's cowardly to poison a child's mind." "You know what's cowardly?" Michael shot back, his tone venomous. "You abandoning me and now trying to take my son away? I've always been there for him, providing everything he needs. And what do you have? A pathetic bakery project." He laughed dryly, glancing around as if seeking an audience for his performance. Sarah felt her blood boil. She could no longer hold back her anger. "Don't talk about things you don't understand. I'll prove I can support my son with dignity. All you know is how to trample others and use your influence to manipulate the law. But this time it won't be so easy." Michael stood, sensing the tension escalate. The other men at the table looked uncomfortable. He leaned in closer, his voice low and threatening. "And what if I ruin this little bakery charade of yours? Sabotage your deliveries? Spread rumors about structural violations? I could shut that warehouse down before you even open the doors." Sarah trembled but didn't back down. She faced her ex-husband firmly, despite her shaking legs. "Try it. I have everything documented, licenses and a lawyer ready to ensure my truth is heard. You won't destroy me like you did before." Michael leaned in so close she could feel his breath, forcing her to take a step back. "You don't learn, do you?" he sneered. "I have plenty of contacts. I can convince half the town to testify against you. And then, goodbye custody of Noah. You'll lose him forever. And that rich farmer, once he sees how much trouble you are, he'll toss you aside too." Sarah's heart sank, but she refused to let her emotions show. "If you think I'll give up, you're wrong. And stop dragging our son into your sick games." Michael smirked, tossing some money on the table for his coffee. Without another word, he walked out, leaving Sarah trembling. The stares from the cafe's patrons weighed on her, some sympathetic, others judgmental, perhaps buying into Michael's version of events. She had to take a deep breath before leaving the cafe, determined not to break down in tears. Back at the farm, Sarah shared what had happened with Ethan and Jana, who were both furious but emphasized that they couldn't let their guard down. Michael would exploit any weakness they showed. In the following days, Sarah intensified her efforts to gather evidence against Michael. She consulted accountants, combed through property records, and did everything possible to uncover proof of his frauds. Balancing this with the bakery's renovations and caring for Noah, who showed signs of distress, was exhausting. The boy alternated between moments of affection and long silences, clearly grappling with his father's manipulations. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. Exhausted but determined, Sarah dressed simply yet elegantly to convey confidence. Before leaving, she hugged Noah tightly, promising to fight with everything she had to keep them together. As she stepped outside into the brisk morning air, Jana waited in the car to drive her to the courthouse. Ethan gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder, wishing her luck. During the drive, her heart raced, anticipating the showdown with Michael in front of the judge. Then her phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. Answering, she was greeted by a formal voice informing her of a sudden, unexpected change. The judge originally assigned to her case had been replaced. Rumors suggested the new magistrate was more susceptible to pressure from influential figures, likely orchestrated by Michael. As Sarah headed to court, her determination was met with yet another challenge, leaving her uncertain about the battle she was about to face. Sarah stepped out of the car, her legs trembling as she stepped onto the sidewalk in front of the courthouse. The overcast sky and the cold breeze seemed to mirror the anxiety pounding in her chest. Jana and Ethan walked with her to the entrance, each offering a different kind of encouragement. Jana squeezed her friend's hand, saying that no matter who the judge was, the truth needed to prevail. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder, promising that everything would be fine. She took a deep breath, thinking of Noah, who was back at the farm under the care of a trusted employee to shield him from the stress of the courtroom. As she entered the lobby, the tension became palpable. She spotted Michael in the distance, talking to his lawyer and two other people who appeared to be acquaintances. His proud stance and disdainful smile left no doubt. He was confident that, under pressure, he could get his way, especially after the sudden change of judge. Sarah swallowed hard, trying not to let herself be intimidated. She thought of Noah and remembered every small victory of the past months, the struggle to renovate the bakery's workshop, the incriminating documents against Michael, and the courage she had found in places she didn't know existed. Dr. Carter arrived shortly after, greeting her with a discreet nod. He led her to a reserved room where they reviewed some key points for the hearing that was about to begin. Everything had been gathered: receipts, photos, and evidence documenting Michael's financial fraud, as well as the lies and threats he had been hurling at Sarah. The lawyer advised her to remain calm, as her demeanor in front of the new judge would be crucial. When they were finally called into the courtroom, Sarah felt her palms grow sweaty. She observed every detail of the room: the neutral-colored walls, the wooden panel at the back, and the sturdy desk where the newly assigned judge was already seated, flipping through some papers. He looked up and instructed everyone to take their seats. Michael sat next to his lawyer while Sarah sat beside Dr. Carter. Jana was present as a witness, offering a composed smile in an attempt to convey confidence. The judge began by summarizing the case regarding Noah's custody, stating that there was currently a temporary custody order in Michael's favor, but that new evidence and arguments had surfaced, questioning his moral integrity. He also noted that Sarah claimed to have the ability to provide a stable environment for her son, countering Michael's accusations that she was financially incapable and emotionally unstable. Hearing these words, Sarah clenched her fists slightly, recalling all the times she had been humiliated. The first part of the hearing involved listening to the lawyers. Michael's lawyer opened by stating that his client had concrete facts, proving Sarah was irresponsible, had a reputation for being argumentative, and had moved to a farm with a stranger merely to create the illusion of stability. Sarah flinched, her face flushing with indignation, but she managed to keep her composure. Dr. Carter, in turn, stated that there was documented evidence of Michael's fraud, revealing not only unethical behavior but also misuse of funds, as well as psychological pressure exerted on the child to turn him against his mother. When the judge requested the presentation of evidence, Michael let out a muffled laugh, insinuating that it was fabricated. Dr. Carter displayed photos, signed documents, and an accountant's analysis pointing out severe discrepancies in Michael's financial transactions. He also presented records of threats, screenshots of text messages sent to Sarah's phone, and Jana's testimony describing how she had witnessed Michael defaming his ex-wife at her workplace. A tense silence filled the room. Michael's lawyer tried to dismiss everything as fabricated pieces, but the judge interrupted him, stating that the authenticity of the documents would require an expert review. Still, the judge's expression revealed discomfort with the seriousness of the allegations. Next, Sarah was called to speak. Her voice trembled at first, but she thought of Noah and how much she needed to be strong. She explained that she had been working as a waitress in the city, but that Michael's harassment had nearly cost her her job. She detailed how, despite her meager income, she had never stopped trying to support her son, even under humiliation. Then she spoke about the bakery project, clarifying that, with Ethan's help, she had seen an opportunity to establish an honest business to sustain herself and provide Noah with a dignified life. She concluded by saying it was unjust for a wealthy, manipulative father to take her son simply because he wielded power over the town. The judge frowned and asked Sarah for more details about the bakery. She described the workshop under renovation, the counters she had installed, and the recipes she was testing, all documented with progress photos and signed budgets. Michael's lawyer reacted with disbelief, calling it staging. However, the judge requested calm and called Ethan as a witness. He entered the courtroom with a firm demeanor, explaining that he had indeed provided a space on the farm and funded the initial renovations, but not out of charity or hidden motives. He stated that he believed in Sarah as a professional and that she would gradually reimburse him or share profits if the business succeeded. He also shared that when he met Sarah, he saw someone courageous, fighting alone against her ex-husband's injustices. Realizing his facade was crumbling, Michael attempted one last tactic. He stood up, accusing Sarah of being unbalanced and neglecting Noah, showing photos of a day when the boy had scraped his knee while playing on the farm. He claimed this proved her negligence. The judge turned to Sarah, asking if the child was receiving proper care. She described every precaution she took, detailing Noah's school routine and how he had become happier on the farm, learning about nature and escaping the tense environment Michael had created. Dr. Carter used this opportunity to present the other side of the photos. Noah's joy during his time on the farm, smiling as he explored the orchards. Jana corroborated every word, describing how the boy seemed calmer and more confident away from his father's pressure. The judge admonished Michael to control himself, reminding him that a custody hearing was no place for scandalous behavior and cheap manipulations. Clearly irritated, Michael continued to challenge the authenticity of the fraud documents linking him to illicit schemes, but his persistence only reinforced the image of a man desperate to hide the truth. The judge announced a brief recess to review the material. Outside the courtroom, Sarah leaned against the wall, her head pounding. Ethan gently held her hand without speaking, but his gaze conveyed confidence that the scales might finally tip in her favor. Jana offered a faint smile, commenting that no matter Michael's influence, this judge didn't seem willing to make a decision without thoroughly examining the evidence. When the break ended, everyone returned. The judge cleared his throat and began speaking in a solemn tone. He stated that the evidence presented not only called into question Michael's financial integrity, but also indicated a pattern of abusive behavior towards Sarah and possibly Noah. He affirmed that an expert review of the documents would be essential for a complete verdict, but, given the strong indications, he saw no grounds to keep custody with someone under suspicion of financial crimes and psychological manipulation. Finally, he granted full custody of the child to Sarah Turner until a new decision was made in the event of an appeal. In practice, this meant Sarah not only left the courtroom victorious, but with a solid case for Noah's permanent custody. A brief silence filled the room before Jana let out a smile, and Ethan gave Sarah's shoulder a firm squeeze. She, stunned, felt her eyes well up with tears of relief. Michael protested, claiming the judge was biased, but the magistrate gave him a stern look, ordering him to respect the decision. With little else to do, Michael stormed out, muttering threats of revenge, but his words rang hollow. All the masks had fallen. Sarah was embraced by Jana and Ethan as she left the courthouse. For the first time in a long while, she felt her heart lighten. She knew appeals could come, but at least at that moment, she held custody of Noah, supported by solid documents that implicated Michael. Her son would no longer be taken from her, and above all, the failed mother image Michael had tried to paint was crumbling. The following day, news of the decision spread throughout the town. Many who had previously believed the gossip began to see who Michael truly was. At the farm, employees and friends gathered to congratulate Sarah and Noah, showering them with affection. The workshop, still undergoing renovations, became the setting for an impromptu celebration. Tables were adorned with garden flowers, and Sarah, riding the momentum, baked her first batches of bread and cakes. A sweet aroma filled the space, piquing everyone's curiosity. It was a glimpse of the prosperous future ahead. When Dr. Carter arrived to finalize some paperwork, he remarked with a knowing smile that the business had been born under immense pressure but would likely succeed given Sarah's perseverance and passion. Noah, beaming with happiness, ran up to his mother and asked for a slice of freshly baked pie. She cut a piece, blew on it to cool it down, and handed it to her son, who took a bite and lit up with delight. "Mom, this is the best pie in the world," the boy exclaimed, licking his lips. "And now we're home." Those around them smiled, moved by the moment. Ethan, standing at one end of the table, watched the scene with affection. He approached Sarah and quietly told her that despite having wealth and properties, he had learned that true riches lay in seeing something genuine flourish, whether an honest business or a united family. She couldn't help but feel emotional. In that moment, she realized it wasn't just about winning in court. It was about rebuilding an entire life, free from abuse and marked by the courage to move forward. As the impromptu party unfolded, Noah, covered in pie crumbs, ran to hug his mother, declaring they would never have to leave again. Sarah smiled, holding him close and closing her eyes for a moment, feeling relief and hope intertwine in a whirlwind of emotions. Dr. Carter bid farewell, assuring her that the process was now on a much safer path. Jana discreetly wiped away a few tears of happiness, recalling how impossible everything had seemed not long ago. Ethan helped serve drinks, and amid the excitement, he rested his hand on Sarah's shoulder again. She looked at him, grateful for opening the farm's doors and believing in her even when she doubted her own worth. Something new was forming between them, a bond that transcended appearances. Then, in a fleeting moment, Sarah raised her eyes to the wide horizon stretching beyond the cultivated fields. She saw the afternoon sun setting, bathing everything in golden light. She felt a profound peace and the certainty that, although challenges remained, she was free to live without fear. Sarah smiled, holding Noah as Ethan watched with pride. In her heart, she understood that the greatest wealth was having love, friendship, and justice by her side, and that the new beginning could be far grander than she had ever imagined. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.